Okay, let me describe to you guys what's going on with my cholesterol situation and all this stuff I've been talking to all of you about. So, this is a very complicated topic, as you know, most likely, and there's a lot of fascinating detail. So I'm going to try to keep it kind of very concise. So, first thing, I want to give kind of a very quick demonstration about what heart disease is all about. Okay, so this is a heart vessel, or really a blood vessel of any kind, but we're concerned with the blood vessels that feed the heart. Those are called the coronary arteries. Okay, so this is an artery, not a vein. Okay, I should have picked a better color. But the artery looks like this. It's a muscle. Okay, that's why it can constrict when your blood pressure is high, or if you want to increase blood pressure, it can constrict or relax to lower blood pressure. Right, so your arteries actually have muscles in them. Your veins, which are the return path for the blood, don't have that, don't have this thickness to them. And interestingly enough, you never get atherosclerosis or calcification of veins. You only get them in the arteries. And why that is exactly, it's not quite known yet. So anyway, you have this artery, okay, and this is called a lumen. It's how much blood, how open it is, okay. And the key here is this muscle wall thing. And so what is atherosclerosis? Well, a lot of people think that it's cholesterol kind of gunking up the inside of the lumen, and that's completely and utterly false, okay? What happens is actually cholesterol enters the muscle, okay? It really enters the inside here, and it forms a plaque. And this can get inflamed, and more plaque and more gunk can get into this, okay? And so over time, this can get smaller and smaller and smaller and smaller until you can see here, the lumen becomes so small that it cuts off blood supply to the downstream organ. Usually in this case, if it's a coronary artery, then your heart will be starved of oxygen. This is a heart attack in some sense. Now there's different kinds, this is the slow kind of, this is not really technically a heart attack. This kind of slow closing off of the artery is safer. That causes kind of heart disease where you can't do as much work. Your heart can't receive as much blood as it needs to. But the more dangerous kind is when a piece of this actually ruptures. So you have this plaque forming here, and then for whatever reason, it explodes, maybe high blood pressure or something, because this is a thin piece over here. And then that forms a gunk, right? A piece of goop in the artery, which is called the thrombus, and that's a clot. So your platelets and other things rush to this gunk that's in the bloodstream and try to clot it because it seems like an injury, right? Like a cut to the platelets. And they form this clot, and this clot travels and then blocks the blood supply completely in the smaller artery downstream. That's a heart attack. And that's called a myocardial infarction. Infarction means blockage. Myocardial means the heart. You can have a infarction in the brain. That's called a stroke. You can have infarction other places, pulmonary embolism, that's in the lungs. But usually what we're most worried about is heart attack and stroke, right? If it's the heart or the brain that gets blocked in this way. So what does LDL and HDL cholesterol have anything to do with this? So let's do a little demonstration here. Let's assume this is LDL, okay? Now it's very important to understand that LDL is not cholesterol. Okay, this is very confusing, and it's caused so much confusion to a lot of people. But LDL is the particle that contains cholesterol. It carries cholesterol with it, okay? Because you can't carry cholesterol in the blood, because blood is water soluble and cholesterol is fat soluble. It's a lipid. So you need this kind of container. So you imagine this is LDL particle, and inside there's cholesterol and other stuff, by the way, vitamins and fats and other things, but mostly cholesterol. So What happens is, for reasons that are not quite understood yet, LDL migrates from inside the lumen here, right, into the blood vessel wall. Now, this is much smaller, so this is not to scale, obviously, right? To give you an idea, an LDL particle is the size of a virus. Normal blood cell is maybe 1,000 times bigger than an LDL particle. So these are very tiny things containing cholesterol. The point is, they migrate past this first layer into the intima over here, and they kind of lodge, right? And then a complicated process happens here. They dump the cholesterol contents, and then immune system cells called macrophages, they come and eat or try to engulf the LDL particle, and then they become so-called foam cell, and other gunk happens that I don't think many people understand fully, but the point is you get pus, right? You get this, it's called a plaque, but it's just pus. It's like immune system pus. And over time, that can build up and cause the problems that we just talked about. Now, HDL, the good guy, supposedly, right, it's actually smaller than the LDL. Again, this is not to scale. These are pickleball balls, by the way, fun sport. But HDL presumably enters the lumen as well, and then removes cholesterol and takes it back to the liver, right? So the liver is producing these particles and packaging up these lipids and sending them out to the bloodstream because tissues need it, right? LDL is used, or not LDL. Cholesterol is used in many different biological processes. It's actually essential for everything that all cells do. That's why the liver is keen on having more cholesterol in the bloodstream rather than less. That you want to err on the side of caution of having more because it's much more important to survive right now rather than worry about heart disease in 60 years or something. So anyway, so HDL is supposed to kind of clean out the arteries, the so-called reverse cholesterol transport, and it does other things as well. And it takes that stuff back to the liver, and then the liver repackages up the cholesterol, sends it back out as LDL. Now, that's a very simplified view of the situation. It's extremely complex, and it's really not well understood. And there's so many studies that kind of contradict each other in terms of the detailed mechanism and this and that. And there's just so much to learn here, and it's quite fascinating. But how is that relevant to my situation? So my LDL, this bad guy, I have too many of these in my bloodstream. I've always had a lot of these in my bloodstream. That's not kind of a new thing. But a recent blood test kind of the level jumped from 200 milligrams per deciliter of LDL-C to 310. And so that jump kind of implies a new level of risk. And it also implies that I might have this thing called familial hypercholesterolemia, i.e. a genetic defect in the liver that causes the liver to not be able to pick up these particles back, right? Because they're supposed to circulate in the blood, and then the liver picks them back up, degrades them, then packages new ones, sends them out, right? And that process is broken to some degree, not completely broken, but it's broken to some degree, and that causes these LDL particles to jam up the bloodstream and enter the lumen more often, right? Because the idea is if there's just a little bit of these, they can deposit cholesterol, HDL can remove it. Deposit cholesterol, HDL can remove it. That process is okay. But if this becomes overwhelming, just add to the plaque, then the HDL can't keep up anymore. That's kind of the rough idea. Again, it's very complicated because it involves the immune system and inflammation and blood sugar as well. That's why diabetics are 6 times as likely to get heart disease, by the way. So all these kind of factors influence this, but having a high LDL level is generally seen as a bad thing because of this problem. We're worried about the balance of input cholesterol into the blood vessel rather, relative to the output. So My blood tests have always been kind of LDL level 190, like I said, 200, but recently went to 300. And by the way, when you get this regular blood test, it's kind of a crappy one because what they do is you can think of, they take all these LDL particles and they cut them and they spill out the cholesterol and they bunch it all together and they measure it. It's a volume. That's what 310 is. There's 310 milligrams. It's not really a volume. It's like amount of cholesterol per deciliter, a tenth of a liter. So that's what this measurement is. So it doesn't tell you exactly how many particles there are and what their function is and what their size is. By the way, the bigger the particles, the better. It seems the consensus is because there's a higher probability. If it's smaller, there's a higher probability that it goes through the lumen and into the intima, the blood vessel wall. So that's what has me concerned. Okay, so on Thursday, I'm getting a so-called CAC score. So the CAC is just a coronary artery calcium score. They do a CT scan of the heart. They look at the arteries in the heart, which, by the way, these things are tiny. I mean, there are, maybe the thickness of this little nub, probably smaller, actually. It's like a spaghetti noodle, right? There's 4 main branches in the heart, and they can get blocked pretty easily. So not exactly the best design, is it? But anyway, so the idea with the CAC score is you've got all this kind of atherosclerosis, and it's quite advanced. And once you have it advanced and it's mature plaque, then calcium is the majority chemical there, not cholesterol, right? Because there's, again, a complex process that's not very well understood, but calcium deposits over time as part of healing, actually. It's kind of like a scar. You're getting a calcified scar, which is better than having pus. So it's actually known that you want calcified plaque. If you have plaque, you don't want the soft kind, because the soft kind is the stuff that can pop like a zit, right? It's a blood vessel zit, and then it could cause a thrombus. The calcified plaque is stable. It's kind of hardened. You can't get rid of it. Okay, the soft plaque is reversible. Calcified plaque is not reversible yet with current technology, but it's more stable and might cause stenosis, i.e. narrowing of the artery, which can give you like problems with blood flow, but it's not an emergency because it's not going to break off. So that's kind of the subtle thing. But still, if you have a calcium score that's not 0, that means you have calcium in your arteries. That means you probably have soft plaque, and it's been an ongoing process. That's why you kind of don't want that. Now, obviously, as you get older, you're expected to have some calcified plaque because that's just life. Okay, but we'll see. So that's the test that has me terrified. Okay. Switching a little bit to psychological aspect of things. So I realized one of the reasons why I'm so terrified of this is actually there was a traumatic event that happened to me when I was in 3rd grade in Syria. So this is in the American school in Damascus. And my sister Lema had a friend in the school, and her dad was playing tennis in the school. So the Damascus Community School was more of like a club as well, like a community center, not just a school, because it was, a private school and people knew each other and blah, blah, blah. So we had tennis courts there. And what happened? Well, this guy who was in his 40s, Arab man, like me right now, was just playing tennis, okay, no symptoms, nothing, and just fell dead. What was it? Heart attack. And so that was an extremely, extremely traumatic event for me. I never really talked about it with anyone. I never really processed it in a very coherent way, right? I should, I already actually booked therapy to deal with this, but hopefully it's enough. But I mean, the event really solidified in my head that you can just like die any second, and there's no warning signs. There's nothing. There's just nothing. You're just playing tennis. It's not like you're old and decrepit and then you fall over and die. You're playing tennis and you can just die. So that was very traumatic. I remember seeing people's faces There were an extreme grief and people crying, and that really messed me up. And I think about that event almost weekly ever since that day, my entire life. And I think that has driven a lot of my neurotic behavior around like health and fitness and trying to control this thing. And so it's just quite the bad luck that I happen to have perhaps a genetic problem right in this exact area, which is my worst ever fear. Okay. I cannot tell you how cruel that feels to me, but this is life, I guess. The universe doesn't give a shit. That's how it goes. So that's the psychological aspect of it. Yes, I know everybody keeps reminding me that stress is also bad for heart disease. And yes, it is, because adrenaline causes release of blood sugar, increased cholesterol, and higher blood pressure, all which accelerates atherosclerosis. Lucky me, right? So I try to manage my stress. That's why meditation and running and all this kind of stuff. But it's very hard. It's very hard to kind of be slapped in the face like this with kind of a genetic situation potentially. So that's the story. I will keep you guys updated, obviously. But if you are curious and you want to know about your cholesterol in more detail, I recommend a test called an NMR lipid profile. It's not very expensive. It's $90 instead of the usual $40 for a standard lipid panel. I think the standard lipid panel doesn't give you much information. If it's fine, then it's fine. But if you want to kind of dig deeper into the relative levels, the relative sizes, then NMR lipid panel, nuclear magnetic resonance, they actually measure directly the size of the particles, the number of them, etc. Maybe I should share my screen and share with you the report. My report, the NMR report, is excellent. Everything's very good, except for one thing, which is the number of LDL particles. It's way off scale, right? Which is expected because the amount of cholesterol in those particles was high to begin with. So I expected that. It's just a massive number. There's supposed to be less than 1,000 particles per unit volume. I have 2,600, more than double the upper limit. So that's concerning. Now, the good news is I have a lot of HDL, right? The good guy. And I have the good kind of HDL. There's actually subtypes. There's 6 or so subtypes of HDL. Some of them are better than others at removing plaque from the arteries. So I have very good kind of HDL, luckily, and I have a lot of it. So that's also good. And also my LDL particles as well, they're bigger in size. If they were smaller, then they're more atherogenic. They can penetrate the artery wall more easily. So supposedly these are bigger, but still, some people say if you have that high of a particle number, it doesn't matter the size of LDL. You've got a problem and you have to fix it. So I'm on medication right now, rosuvastatin, which is the kind of the most powerful common statin. It's pretty tried and true technology for at least 30 years, 20, 30 years. And yeah, we'll see how it goes. I don't expect it to drop my LDL too much, but we'll see. We'll see if the effect is good. You have to watch out for side effects with statins. And then if that's not enough, then I will have to consider PCSK9 inhibitors, which is a shot that attacks, it's an antibody actually, that attacks a protein that degrades the LDL receptor. You want more LDL receptors on your liver because those are the things that catch the LDL particles from the bloodstream and pull them in. So PCSK9 is this protein that degrades these receptors. So you can take an antibody that attacks this PCSK9 and disables it so that there's more receptors from the liver to catch the LDL particles and pull them out of the blood and excrete them into the bile, into your digestive system. So that's the hope with PCSK9 inhibitors. They seem to be relatively risk-free, which is very good, and they lower your LDL by 60, 70%. The problem is, though, they're very expensive. They're about $6,000 a year, and insurance companies don't want to really cover them unless you really already had a heart attack or you're an extremely high risk. But I want to try them, even out of pocket, just to see the effect on my LDL, and we'll go from there. Okay. If you have questions, as always, reach out to me. I would love to discuss this stuff forever. And I really do wish I go back to school. We'll see. I want to become I want to dedicate my life to, this metabolism, lipidology metabolism. It's extremely fascinating. I would find a lot of meaning in trying to help other people with this. So we'll see where this goes. Maybe this is a kind of a life transformation moment. All right. Bye for now.